Hello, welcome to Gimme Empathy. I'm your host Scott Mercer, and this is a podcast where I talk to people about what they do and what they think and what happens to them and how they live their lives. On this episode, I talk to an accomplished creative person, Kaitlyn Plyley, who has performed poetry, comedy, one-person show, theatre. She's written for publications including Junkie, The Lifted Brow, Vice, the Sydney Morning Herald. She's very accomplished, to say the least. I first met Kaitlyn through my ex-girlfriend Sam, who was in episode 10 of this podcast. Kaitlyn used to be a co-host on the 4ZZZ community radio show Megahertz that Sam still does. Kaitlyn was also in the same slam poetry scene here in Brisbane, along with J.M. Donnellan from episode 6, and those two knew each other. So yeah, Sam and I used to go out and see them do slam poetry. But to be honest, I never really knew Kaitlyn personally all that well. It was really more through her work. Kaitlyn has a podcast called Just a Spoonful, on which she talks to young people living with chronic illness and disability. It really took on an extra level of resonance for me after I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy to hear all these stories of people and how they manage their health and just live their normal lives, really. It's very funny how you get to know people in a very particular way by listening to their podcasts. After Kaitlyn moved to Melbourne, I continued listening to Just a Spoonful, and even just hearing like her talk with someone else for an hour or two every once in a while on my headphones, I still felt I got a sense of, what her life was like. And maybe you have that kind of relationship with me. Maybe if you're someone I know, maybe you haven't seen me for a while. Maybe this is the only way you really keep up with what's going on in my life. Or maybe I don't know you at all. Maybe you're a miraculous stranger listening to this. And if so, thank you most of all, actually, for your attention, I guess. So it was super interesting when I went down to Melbourne to catch up with Kaitlyn and see how that life of hers I had in my head matched up with how she was really doing. I guess a lot of people don't get a chance to see that. You don't get a chance to go out to see what Mark Brown's life is really like. Is he really that neurotic? Is he really that way about the food and the cats? And anyway, on the second day of my podcasting trip to Melbourne, I took the tram north to Preston to see Kaitlyn, and we recorded by far the longest conversation I've had on this podcast. I considered cutting it into 2 episodes, especially because we just spend a very long time talking about the Hunger Games. But in the end, it really does flow better altogether. So I hope you'll bear with me. So if you plan this podcast by how long it goes for, just be aware that, maybe this will be over 2 jogs or 2 trips to work or however it is you listen to podcasts. So yeah, there are extensive spoilers for the Hunger Games trilogy of books by Suzanne Collins in this episode, as well as the Ellie Chronicles by John Marsden as well. It's probably worth just going over the basic plot outline of the Hunger Games at this stage if you're totally unfamiliar with it. Basically, it's a series of 3 books by Suzanne Collins that was adapted into 4 movies. So it's set in a dystopian future where once a year, the government collects a bunch of teenagers from across the country and makes them fight to the death on television. The series, it's focused on Katniss Everdeen, one of the teenagers, and she's played by Jennifer Lawrence in the movies, as she joins the rebellion to overthrow the government. That's basically it. We do talk about a lot of other things in this podcast. We talk about Kaitlyn's ambition, the role that Twitter plays in her life, the home environment, and friendships. One last thing I have to tell you before we get to the episode is that once or twice in this conversation, I make some pretty sharp U-turns to redirect the topic of what we're talking about. This is because sometimes when I do a podcast, people ask beforehand to not talk about certain topics too much for a wide variety of reasons. And a couple of times we strayed close to talking about something that Kaitlyn has talked about at length before, which is her own experience with chronic illness. Kaitlyn has ME/CFS, sometimes known as chronic fatigue syndrome. She's written extensively about it before and talks about it a lot on her own podcast, Just a Spoonful. If you want to hear Kaitlyn talk more about it, I strongly recommend you listen to her podcast or look up her writings. Basically, ME/CFS is a condition categorized by extreme fatigue and chronic pain, but really Kaitlyn can speak for herself much better than I can when it comes to this subject. So really, go look up her stuff. The point is, she wasn't trying to hide anything. She's just talked about ME/CFS so much in the past that it understandably becomes exhausting after some point. That's all. Okay, this is it. Episode 13, Kaitlyn Plyley. Did you have breakfast this morning, Kaitlyn?
Thanks for asking if I did.
I shouldn't say this morning because.
Oh yeah, no, this afternoon. It was this. Yeah, I had cereal and it was very healthy and had blueberries on it.
What kind of cereal do you like?
That's a different question because there's only so much food I'm allowed to have.
Oh, okay.
So the food I like isn't what I have. I have Special K. It's a special gluten-free Special K that costs extra.
Would you say it's extra Special K?
I'd say even though we usually get charged more for gluten-free, it's less special.
Oh. So Kaitlyn, how I normally start this podcast is asking my guest, how do you know me, for the benefit of the listeners?
I don't remember anymore. I mean, I guess through 4ZZZ when we both hosted shows at 4ZZZ.
What was your show?
My show was Mega Hers, the feminist show.
I think the first time I met you was after some sort of event in the city. It might have been a poetry slam thing.
Probably. Oh, yeah, because Josh, poetry.
Josh as well, and my ex-girlfriend Sam was also a big lover of slam poetry.
That's right.
I think we might have gone to see either you or Josh or both of you performing somewhere in the city.
Probably both.
And I remember going out for ice cream afterwards at this magic ice cream place.
That sounds familiar. I don't have a great memory in general, so please don't take offense. But I do remember that I did a gig, a poetry gig. This is back when I used to do a lot of poetry gigs. And so I had met Josh. It was like a weird, this is how I know you through like several avenues, because I met Josh like my first couple months in Brisbane, and he was at a yarn storytelling night that I had performed at. And we started talking afterwards, and it turned out that we both knew the same publisher, this like quirky guy that I had done a story about, and he had published Josh's first book. And then I did a poetry gig, and Sam, your ex-girlfriend Sam, was there, and then she approached me to come on Mega Hers, and then I became a host on Mega Hers, and then I suppose through one or both ways I met you.
Yes, at some point. Yeah.
Because you're friends with Josh and co-host with Josh, you were at the time, and you were dating Sam. And I think I just saw you around 4ZZZ. We did a zombie shoot one time. Remember that?
Oh, that was awful. I mean, it looked great. The results were great.
It was so fun, though.
So this was one year our Radiothon theme was, I think, Dawn of the Zed, I believe,
yeah,
or
that
something
sounds
like
right.
that.
Something like that.
And so lots of people were doing zombie-themed promotions as part of our subscriber drive. And one of the ones I got roped into was doing a zombie photo shoot for the Mega Hers program, in which zombie men representing the patriarchy were attacking the hosts of Mega Hers who were fighting us off with weapons.
Yeah, and we were really kick-ass.
Yeah,
we looked great.
You did look great.
You were a really convincing zombie.
Oh, thank you.
But I've got a great photo on my Instagram of you like reading destroying the joint, or like something like a feminist collection of essays, just like casually reading it in the office dressed as a zombie. Like, it just looked like you were the most literate zombie ever.
The only reason I say that there was an awful day was because the makeup that they put on us was very good. Like, it was, I'd say it's almost Walking Dead level good. There were all these bits, like prosthetic bits that were open sores on my face and stuff. The thing is, whenever I've had makeup on my face, I find it disgusting. It just feels super gross. And
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
Everyone feels that way about makeup. Some of us just have to suffer for beauty.
Yeah. And then, taking it off at the end of the day, because you have to use like corrosive chemicals to get that stuff off. And
oh, yeah, because it was like it was like professional special effects makeup.
Yeah.
Ugh. I never thought of that. Yeah, I guess looking back, I didn't have to wear makeup because I was just being like a person. I'm so sorry. I had no idea that See, this is why it's like I now have more empathy for you. This is what this podcast does.
Empathy for the zombies.
For the zombie cosplayer. Zombies, I'm still on the fence about.
So, Kaitlyn, we're recording this in Melbourne in your lounge room. What are you doing in Melbourne?
What aren't I doing in Melbourne? No, I always wanted to live in Melbourne. And Brisbane, I love Brisbane. I really was sad to leave, but the summers are too hot for me. Like genuinely, like I'm not saying that like flippantly, like I would almost die every summer and like have to be like hospitalized. It was like bad. So I always wanted to live in Melbourne, and I tried moving here years ago, but I didn't really know anyone. And since then there's been like an exodus of my Brisbane and Perth friends to Melbourne.
There are waves of that happen.
Yeah. And like the waves had just benefited me by this point. So I've been here for a year and it's lovely. I love it.
And you wear many caps. You're a writer, poet, theatre maker. What are you working on at the moment?
I'm writing a book, trying to be an author, inspired by our mutual friend Josh Denellen and many others. He is an inspiration to me though, because he takes being an author seriously as a job, and he just cranks out books. Like, I don't know how the dude does it. He also has way more energy than I do. So I try not to like compare myself to his output. But yeah, I am writing a book, and I'm nearly halfway through the first draft of the manuscript, which is exciting because I never thought I'd get this far.
Can I ask what your book is about?
You can, but I don't have to answer. No. It's about chronic illness. So it's a lot of what my writing is about, and a lot of my work is about disability and chronic illness. So I'm trying to put all my thoughts together into a book.
Is it fiction or non-fiction?
Oh, non-fiction, yeah.
Like a series of essays, a memoir?
Yeah, sort of both. It's still taking shape. Yeah, I keep thinking that I've got the form nailed down, and then it changes. I don't know, like I don't want it to be a dry collection of essays. I love essay collections, but I'm trying to figure out the best way to communicate my feelings about chronic illness, because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so it's not going to be from a medical insider's standpoint.
What has been a thing that has surprised you that you've learned since you started writing your book?
I'm not actually that grateful for being chronically ill. You know? It sucks. And I hate it. So I think I started writing the book thinking that narratively, just like with an eye to a good narrative, I wanted there to be some kind of redemption at the end. Maybe for me personally, I can find that, but in general, no, it's just shit. It's not gonna. There's not gonna be a cure, as far as I know. Touch wood. Maybe there would be, but it seems unlikely. It's more likely that statistically, it's more likely that I'll die young from it. And I'll just keep being in pain and fatigue until I die. So I guess the thing that I've had to come to grips with is that that's a reality that that has to be a reality that I can live with.
Did you have a prepared topic you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Ambition.
Ambition?
Yeah.
Would you say you're an ambitious person?
Yes.
Have you always been?
Yes.
What were your ambitions when you were 12?
Oh, when I was 12, I wanted to be an environmentalist and save the world.
Cool. And what were your ambitions when you were 16?
When I was 16? Well, when I was 16 was when I became ill. So I wanted to just either die or live, but stop being in limbo. But I guess outside of that, I must have been ambitious before I became ill. And I'm trying to remember what that would have been. I think I wanted to be a movie star, but like also save the world. You know, I wanted to do lots of stuff.
Like all good movie stars try to do.
Well, that's it. Yeah. It's going to be like the Angelina Jolie pit, you know, of the world.
Did you do much acting?
I did. I wasn't very good. I did drama all the way through school, and I did after school acting classes every week. Then my teacher was the guy who directed Ship to Shore. If you ever watched Ship to Shore, And I went to school with one of the kids who acted in that.
Wow.
Because Perth.
Oh, Perth, of course. Yeah, that show was always it seemed so far away.
It was.
So they shot in WA. I didn't realize.
Yeah, I think it was Baron Productions, and they are a WA company.
What else did they make any of those other classic ones like Ocean Girl or
No, I don't think they did Ocean Girl. They did a couple of other smaller ones, but don't quote me on this, but I think Ship to Shore was like the biggest one.
Right.
It was definitely my favorite. That's all I know. I was a bit obsessed with it. Couldn't tell you anything about it now. It's just fallen out of my memory. I remember vaguely that they were on an island and that there were redheads, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. There was a bit of blur in your memory between that and Round the Twist, I guess.
Not for me.
Oh, really?
Because Round the Twist seemed very far away. You know, like just Ship to Shore was so WA. It felt more familiar to me. But also I read Paul Jennings books like religiously. I had this thing in primary school where like for a while, and like I can't remember if it was actually cool or if only I thought it was cool, but you know how they go through like fads of like there were like status fads. So it's like to get the most status in year 4, you got to have the most Tamagotchis or like whatever.
Right. Pogs,
yeah.
Pokemon
Tazos.
cards.
We had Tazos.
Yep.
Or like yo-yos. We had what I called marble season, or we all called it marble season. Did you have that? You're nodding. Was that just my school?
It was longer the season. I remember a few years when everyone was into marbles.
We had this weird thing where like for 2 months a year, we'd all become obsessed with marbles. And it was just like understood that we would come back to this a year later and be obsessed again. I don't know what was going on.
Also, you stopped playing marbles for part of the year.
Yeah.
Knowing you'd come back to it. Why did you...
No, I know. It was like unsustainable because we were truly, completely consumed by our marble thoughts. Like, I remember just like friendships were broken over somebody swapping your Galaxy for a Cat's Eye, and you're like, how could you? Galaxy is worth so much more. And
yeah, Cat's Eyes were the most common ones, weren't they?
yeah, we called them crap houses. I haven't thought about that in like 15 years, the fact that we call Cat's Eyes crap houses. What are you drawing out of me, Scott? Stuff I've deeply buried.
I remember it was in a game of marbles that I got my first real
Kiss?
Sexist comeuppance.
Oh.
Because there were 2 types of games of marbles you would play. There was for funsies, where you just, play against each other and then nothing happened. It was just for...
It was like practice almost.
Practice, yeah. And then there was for keeps.
Oh, yes.
Where if you lost, then the other person got all the marbles you'd played with in that round.
Yeah, that's where friendships really lived and died.
So when I was in about grade 3, I think, I didn't play keepsies very often because, I didn't want to lose my marbles. But I played keepsies against a girl in grade 5 because I thought, oh, I'll beat her. She's a girl.
Oh, shit.
I didn't beat her, Kaitlyn.
Early. It starts. Well, of course you didn't. She was probably like twice your size.
Of course, she was so much more skillful than me. She was great at marbles, and she got my marbles, and I was like, oh. And that's where the seed of feminism starts. Brutal defeats.
Oh, please don't let that be where men turn to feminism, is when they get brutally defeated by a girl. And then you either turn to men's rights activism or feminism.
Yeah.
It's very fraught, that time in your life.
I was a shit of a kid. Getting back to ambition, so was being an actor your first creative ambition?
No. My first creative ambition was to be an author. I wanted to write books and poetry. I wrote poetry first. I wrote everything fiction when I was a kid. One of my earliest memories of writing is, I think I was in year 1 or 2, and I had written a play, and I had cast my friends in it. I was playing the lead role and directing, obviously. And I got all my friends, my little tiny friends together, and we all went to the principal's office, and I won't say pleaded, because I wasn't a pleading kind of kid. I was more of a debater. So I laid out the case of why he should let us perform my play at assembly. And he agreed, and we did.
How long was the play?
I don't know. Because when you're a kid, time is a bit warped. But I do remember that instead of remembering their lines, I had written out everyone's lines on scraps of paper. So they would step forward when it was their turn to say their lines, read it off the paper, and then step back into line. And I remember being disappointed with the staging, but pleased with the overall performance.
What was the play about?
It was based heavily on Enid Blyton characters, and I really don't remember what it was about. I think there was a middle-aged housewife who needed help solving a mystery or something. It's usually the sort of thing I was into.
At what point did you start to seriously consider the creative industries as a career?
Like 3, 4, 5 years old. Like I was serious.
And you stuck with that all the way. Did you have...
Almost, yeah.
Was anyone telling you to get a real job as a fallback or anything? They
still are, Scott. Yes. Yes. It's too sad to think about, but yeah, I'm still, all the way through it was like, that's nice, but you need to get a real job.
What are your ambitions these days?
I mean, I really want to finish this book. Pretty focused on that at the moment. I would like to stage another solo show sometime. So to sort of make most of my ambitions happen, I'm having to work on my health because my health really has taken a dive in the last couple of years. So my ambitions at the moment revolve around being able to work a 6-hour day or stay out of bed most of the day, like that sort of thing, like having more physical stamina.
Is ambition always a positive push factor on you?
No. They say things like a blessing and a curse. I don't know, maybe it's just mostly a curse because the blessings are only blessings if you value ambition. Like if you don't put an innate value on ambition, then it's just a curse because my ambition tells me, like dictates what my idea of success is and then makes me strive for that. So if I wasn't so ambitious, maybe I'd be happier, Do
you ever wish you weren't so ambitious?
Yes, all the time. So my chronic illness makes me very tired, and it's a condition where a very specific part of it is the push-crash cycle. So if you push too hard, you'll have a disproportionate crash, and it doesn't come straight away all the time. So it's really easy to push yourself too hard, and then a couple of days later, you just won't be able to breathe, you won't be able to move, and it's like you genuinely can't push through this. You cannot just grit your teeth and, you have to rest. And not just rest physically, but emotionally and mentally, because all that stuff is all energy. It's all spending energy. And so I'm chronically ill to the point where I can't work full time and I can't even really work part time. So just kind of casually sometimes, freelancing. And when you're as ambitious as I have been since I was born, basically, it's okay, work is where you get your sense of self-worth from. You can't work now, and you may never be able to work again. So then it's who the hell am I? But at the same time, I haven't been able to get myself to let go of my ambitions yet because I don't know who I am without them.
What do you think would happen if you just tried giving up everything? If you stopped writing, got off Twitter, if you gave up your plans for your show, how do you think that would feel?
Terrible. Something would have to come into the void, and I'm not sure I would like what it was. If I stopped wanting to do creative things, I'd have to look somewhere else for a sense of purpose. And I think in the past I've turned to relationships, be it romantic or whatever, and put too much of that intense need onto people. Or onto some other ambition. It's just I haven't found a way to turn it off yet, Scott. I can't turn it off. So I even had my psych tell me that I'm an intense person, and I was like, holy shit, you're my psychologist. I was like, I don't think I'm an intense person, and she was like, yeah. I was like, why? What do you mean? Why?
I want to talk to you about Twitter.
Oh, talk about blessings and curses.
You're a fairly prolific Twitter user. You have nearly 3,000 followers.
Yeah.
What effect does Twitter have on your psyche, do you think?
Oh, not good ones. So, I mean, I feel like to talk about this, we have to separate out Twitter pre-2016 and Twitter post-2016, because it has become a garbage fire. So it has a very different effect on me now than it used to when I first became really involved in Twitter. Or at least for me, the way I was using it and still use it, it was more of a place for conversation, for connecting with people, for writing jokes. And now it's become, because of the state of the world and of the discourse out there and like how the news cycle works, it has become retweeting the most hellish stuff. And everybody's angry, everybody's confused and sad, and all of that's legit. But it's really difficult because the people who became, like at the beginning-ish of Twitter, the people who became really, really popular on it are like people who are really good at nailing that ironic, self-conscious meta tone of Twitter, which I just love when it's done well. I love it. It's so interesting. It's like, I always think of it like I've definitely, like in other interviews, compared Twitter to poetry, because you have to think really carefully about what you're saying, and you have to, it's like microfiction almost. But as this isn't really about the medium so much as like what's being poured into it now. It is a microblogging platform. So most people who use Twitter regularly understand the concept of threads. So, I mean, you know what a thread is. A
bunch of tweets strung together to convey a larger point?
Yeah, exactly. But I have had like instances like a couple of years ago where I made a tweet that was like a one-off joke, and it got picked up by some irony bros and some shitsters, the kind of people who have like, you know, tens of thousands of followers, and they will retweet people that they have deemed stupid, and then they'll encourage their followers to mock that person for having such a bad take, like for being so stupid as to think that that was a good tweet. And the thing is that my tweet was taken, here we go, out of context, and it got like, what was incredible was that it got picked up by, I was getting shit from every single corner. This is what was incredible about this tweet. I almost feel like I did something impressive if it wasn't so horrible and mundanely awful. Like, is that I made like a throwaway joke. It was worded like, hey, what if we've been going about solving the gender wage gap all wrong and we should just be paying men less? It's like a very simple premise for like a silly joke. And unfortunately, what I didn't realize, and this is my own ignorance, is that there are people who genuinely think that's a good solution to the gender wage gap. And I was like, oh, I was just reversing an assumption and then ridiculing that assumption. I didn't think it was a very good tweet. Like, I didn't think that this is like something worth defending. But I also was like, people are attacking me. Like I had all different kinds of feminists attacking me, and I am a feminist. I had people calling me a TERF. I had people calling me Margaret Thatcher. That was really bad. The worst one for some reason was someone called me Emma Watson, and I was like, how dare you? Because like this was at the peak of like her he for she kind of like thing, and I was like, they were like, I got called a white feminist, I got called classist, and then of course there were like the shitty shit men on Twitter were like really flooding my mentions with like, you know, rape threats, death threats, all that kind of stuff, usual stuff, man hater, blah blah blah. That stuff I was like, yeah, okay, like that's horrible, but like I can kind of easily like see that that's wrong. But the people who were calling me a TERF, that was hard. Like, and so I actually did reply to those people and talk to them and be like, hey, all these people attacking me had never interacted with me before, never interacted with my Twitter before. Clearly, it seems like I had never heard of these people. But off of 140 characters, they decided that they knew my identity. And that really gave me empathy, hey, for people who do go viral, because you can say shitty things and then just apologize for saying a shitty thing. But also I think you gotta, I don't know, I don't want to be one of those people that's like, it's just a joke, because it wasn't just a joke. Like, in that joke, I was trying to convey certain a worldview, which is that I think the gender wage gap is real and should be solved and isn't being. And I just wanted to make a silly joke about how it isn't simple to solve. And people read whatever they were mad at, they sort of read that into what I said. And it was almost like a Rosetta Stone of like people's anger on Twitter. So in a way I was like, you know, once I stopped crying, I was like, wow, we've really achieved something special here today. I don't know. I can't really defend it, because then I like started getting silly in the thread. And this is where threads come into it. So like under the tweet, I started writing things like, lol, what if we did do that though? What would it look like? And then I started trying to think it through, as if it was almost like writing spec fiction. Like I was just like, the thing is, right, I had like 2,000 followers and I was just fucking around. And I usually get like, maybe like if people really like a tweet, I might get like 40 likes. You know what I mean? It's not like I knew my audience. I knew they'd get where I was going, but it got picked up by some people who were like, we're going to rip into her. And it doesn't help that I'm a woman. Like they could see my avatar. So then like some guys were like screenshotting my profile photo and then commenting on, you know, how big they thought my boobs might be and like, you know, all this kind of stuff. And, so I see. And, you know, like all this stuff there it was horrible. And that's a problem on Twitter is the, I don't know. I think the people who really use Twitter in good faith don't do this as much, but there is like that pile-on aspect, and I try not to take part in it. But what I do before I call someone out for a shitty tweet is I do a cursory glance at their profile to figure out if they were probably being sincere or not. Because sometimes people will be like, I was joking. And then everyone's like, oh, okay. That actually puts a hugely different spin on what you were saying. But yeah, then you'll look at someone's profile and it'll be like Hitler lover 88. And you're like, oh, okay.
They at least make themselves easy to identify, those Hitler lovers.
Those Confederate flags. It's literally a red flag. It's great.
Have you ever had a really, really positive experience on Twitter?
All the time. All the time. This is why I'm still on it. Yeah, like that experience I was talking about was like 48 hours. But the rest of the time, I'm pretty much having a pretty nice time on it. And the community I have found through Twitter is incredible. Like Twitter rewards authenticity to a certain extent. It depends on which Twitter you're on. Like sometimes I struggle because sometimes my Twitter account sort of started as like, it originally started when I was the Nash Young Writers Month ambassador for Western Australia. So my original handle was NYWM_WA. And it was all about encouraging young writers to write in WA. Very, very specific. And then at some point, it just became just me talking shit. And now it's like, I've had so much going on in my life. It's become more angsty and more sincere.
It's more of a venting platform.
Yeah, and I have been trying to keep a lid on that because I have a real tendency to get on Twitter and just be like, I'm going to fire off some tweets about this thing I'm angry about right now. And that can often be rewarded by like people that I don't know will like that and retweet it and stuff and say, you know, this thread and stuff like that. And that feels like good. You get that sort of like, oh, I'm getting attention and I'm getting approval. But it does sort of reward the outrage, overshare kind of thing sometimes. Oversharing is a fraught word, but when I say overshare, I mean more than I'm comfortable with. I don't mean more than other people are comfortable with. Oversharing to the, like feeling that thing of like the crowd's like, come on, say more, subtweet more, get angrier. And you're like, I don't know if I want to encourage this in myself. So I try to also post when I'm happy and post positive things and post like appreciation. Like I'm trying to balance it out and not just use it as a place I only go when I need to vent. because then the quality of interactions you attract that way is kind of a downer. It'll just be people being like, hope you're okay, or people being like, yeah, men are trash. And like, that's like good in its place. But like, when you spend as much time on Twitter as I do, it's like, I need a bit more variety. I need also to feel okay.
Is part of it being a creative person that it's so easy to finish a tweet? Because, you know, it can take years to write books, to put together a play, to write a poem. Is that part of it?
No, you're so right. You're 100% right. And like I was saying, it's that thing where like you're getting immediate feedback, and people often say like, you're giving away your content for free. But it's like, yeah, I'm giving away my ideas. But the thing is that I really have gotten back from Twitter way more than I've put into it. Like, I've gotten friends, I've gotten professional network, I've literally gotten money, lots of money. I mean, for me, like living on like near the poverty line, if I say on like, sometimes I'll just put a PayPal link up on Twitter and be like, I'm struggling this month. If you like my tweets, maybe check me some cash. People don't have to, and I'm not fussed if they like, there's no expectation that they will, but it's like a tip jar. And people that I have never interacted with have given me like, it's like, okay, so I tweet a lot about feminism and the way men behave, like cis men, you know, specifically. And I sort of talk about sexism and abuse in relationships. It's a lot of it is just me trying to figure out what's going on. Why have men treated me like this? Why are men treating my friends like this? Like, what's going on? Like, why is toxic masculinity like this? And what is it like? And I think I'm screaming into the void and mostly just talking to women and like a few men who agree with me. But then when I ask for help, then in my private inbox, in my PayPal account, I get like hundreds of dollars from men who've never interacted with me. And they'll put a little note on it saying, your tweets made me think differently about things. Or I'll get a message saying like, hey, that thing you tweeted the other day really made me examine my own behavior. And I never expected that. Never felt like I was entitled to that. But it's there. And that's just huge. It's hugely positive.
So the void you're screaming into isn't as empty as you thought?
No, it screams back. Sometimes nasty things, but mostly nice things.
Did you have another prepared topic you want to talk about?
Yes, friendship.
So you said you made a lot of friends on Twitter. For friendships that start on Twitter that don't become with people geographically distant, what does an online friendship look like? I don't really have that. Really?
I almost only have that. Well, not so true since I moved to Melbourne and the public transport's better here, so it's easier to get around and see people in meet space, as the kids say. But yeah, I guess because I spend so much time in bed, unable to put a light on or listen to things, text-based communication is really good. It gives me more time to think about what I'm going to say. So, I mean, that's helpful when I'm having a really bad cognitive day. I have a lot of friends from the internet, and I have a friend who's actually writing about this at the moment. Alexandra Neal, a good friend of mine, is amazing at defending, advocating for, and articulating what it's like to be friends on the internet. So I almost want to be able to go like, just go and listen to her, because I don't really know how to put it. But actually, like, she was an internet friend of mine, and then now we like hang out all the time. And like, we were both on an email chain 8-9 years ago, and then we became Twitter friends. And then it's just like, I went to her house one afternoon and we played Settlers of Catan, and now we're just real friends. But my internet friends are real friends. Oh, like, for example, a woman in Melbourne started following me. I think like some people linked us on Twitter like at the beginning of the year because we were both looking for housemates. We didn't end up living together, but I like her tweets. I guess she likes my tweets. We'd interact sometimes. And then last week I needed a lift to a doctor's appointment, and she showed up and she drove me. We arranged it on Twitter. Her avatar isn't a picture of her. I got no idea what she looks like. And I realized that as I was walking out to the car park, and I was like, I don't know who I'm looking for. And like, she's bloody awesome. Like, we had a great time just chatting in the car, and I mean, every time I think about getting off Twitter, I think about those sort of interactions and how that wouldn't have happened without the internet, because I don't have the capacity to just like walk out into the world anymore. Like since like living with my disability, it's like a lot harder to maintain IRL friendships because they require a lot of FaceTime and like a lot of physical leaving the house-ishness.
To do activities.
Yeah. And like, it's nice because like on the internet, you're usually connected by interest. And I have found that in the real world, you're usually connected by geography, which isn't always the best way to meet soulmates, you know.
I think, yeah, like the vast majority of people I'm friends with are people I play music with or have played music with. And I have to really make an effort to catch up with my non-muso friends. And I feel like a bad friend sometimes for not catching up as often.
It's hard. It's like friendship's a lot of work. And that's something that I struggle with having internet friendships is how real is this? How much effort am I supposed to be putting into this? Because sometimes you have friends that you think are really, really close, like who you only connect with via like text message or Twitter or whatever. And then you find out that something huge happened in their life and you just had no idea because you weren't physically there. So they only probably, and I've done this as well, sometimes you only tell people who happen to be around you because putting something down into black and white text on your computer might be too much at that time. If it's like a really traumatic event or something. Or you just see that like your internet friends are hanging out with their real friends. You know what I mean? Like they're all at a park together and you're like, oh, you're real friends. Like I'm not really your friend. So there's an element of like, it sometimes feels like there's tears to like the friendship. And then sometimes it can feel like when you're like me and you live quite housebound and quite alone all the time, it can feel like I'm not on any of the tiers or like I'm only on the outer tier. And that sucks. That's the downside. It's because like you can go days without seeing another human without breathing the same oxygen as another human being. And that sucks.
Have you ever had a really bad friendship bust up?
Yeah. Like so many. Where do I start?
Let's go, let's say with a school friend.
Oh, yeah. No, I had a best friend in year 8. No, we were just friends in year 8. And then we were best friends in year 9. And like we used to like several times a day write letters to each other and then slip them into each other's lockers. And we would just write back and forth as characters like all day and just make up weird stories like, oh, what were you doing? Oh, I was being chased by a mob of rabbit kangaroos. Like, oh, what were you? It's like we were just in math. Yeah, she was my best friend and I would hang out at her house all the time and we did everything together. And then at the beginning of year 10, I remember this. She said, we're going to be cool this year, Kaitlyn. And I totally get that. Like, and she was like, we're going to rule this school. And I was like, okay. I not really. I was like, sure. I just adore you and we'll go along with whatever you want to do.
Did a Blink-182 song just start playing and there was a crane shot of you guys walking into the school?
What's my age again? What's it? Nobody likes you when you're 14. That's also true. Yeah, no, like I think that was in her mind what was going to happen. It was going to be like that Sum 41 song where we just like lift out of the swimming pool like playing electric guitars. But like she correctly figured out that the only way to be cool at that school was not to be friends with Kaitlyn Plyley. Yeah, sad, really sad. So she just dumped me, and it was just like that. It was just like because we were like 14-year-old girls. It was like not much emotional intelligence there. It was just kind of, I mean, for us specifically, not that 14-year-old girls don't have emotional intelligence because they do. We didn't. And I guess she just stopped talking to me and that was it.
Did she ever give you an explanation?
No. But so we in the West, we call schoolies leavers. So at the end of year 12, you go on leavers and most people at my school went down to Bustleton and like you just lay on the beach and stuff and usually probably drink your body weight in lolly water. I was meant to go with I think like her and a bunch of other girls from that kind of friendship group, and they like a couple days before leavers was meant to start, they emailed me or texted me or something and said like, oh, we're not going, Kaitlyn, like sorry, it's off. And I was like, You know what's coming, don't you? And I was like, oh, that's sad, but okay. Because I don't really drink. I don't really care about that. I was like, oh, I'll just spend levers like, here at home and then go to the beach. And I found out that they had all gone without me. So in their words, they had made new plans that were exactly like the old plans, except didn't involve me. So that was pretty rough. I was glad to get out of school. School sucked.
What about as an adult? Have you had a bad friendship breakup?
Yeah, just recently. He was one of my best mates through uni. My friendship with him is part of the reason that I'm so outspoken now about not letting men get away with shitty behavior just because they're nice to you, just because they're your friend. Because he was just a bit shit to women, just in that kind of like dude bro way. But like, as far as I knew, not in like any kind of criminal way. And like I remember like there was a big blow up because I was in a big friendship group of these people, and like there was a big blow up when it came out that he had cheated on his girlfriend, who was, not that this is relevant, but a really lovely person. Not that anyone deserves to be cheated on, but...
Was she also in the friendship group?
Not really, no. Especially not after that. I don't think she wanted to be reminded. I don't think she went to our uni also, but I sort of was late to the friendship group because I started uni a year after the rest of them. So I was never really quite sure what happened there. But all I knew is that he was nice to me and he was a good friend to me. So what business was it of mine, the way he treated other people who I didn't really know? Yeah. It's pretty insidious, hey? Like, anyway, so this year I found out that he is, in fact, shit to women in criminal ways. And I got a message from him about something unrelated. And I just said to him, we're not friends anymore. I've heard about what you've done and I don't want contact. We're not friends. And that's it. And it's really sad and it's disgusting. It makes me feel sick because who knows what he was doing all those years that I was hanging out with him all the time. Maybe no one found out. And I supported him a lot. I guess there's nothing I could have done to stop him being that way. But you always wonder that if you'd pulled him up more. I did though. The rape jokes, he would call me for advice on negging women. And I'd be like, why are you calling me? Why are you calling anyone? Why are you doing this? And I'd just hang up on him when he'd do that kind of shit. And I would think that that was enough. But like that I could still be his friend as long as I called him out on his shit. But now I just think that maybe people like that will always look around and say, well, if I've still got friends, I can't be that bad. And I just can't help wondering if actually like depriving them of support is the only way to stop what he did from happening.
There's this thing that loyalty is like really put forward as a very highly valued trait to have in the society we live in. It's like it's valued by all others. You look after your mates at the expense
Mateship.
of others even.
Yeah.
And there are really no stories about that you're taught when you're young in culture and pop culture or anything about calling out people when they need to be called out.
Yeah.
So we don't have a model from when we're young to kind of to even attempt to do that.
Yeah, people get put into either the friend box or the bully box, and you don't engage with bullies, and you have to be really loyal to your friends. But what if your friend is a bully to other people, which is almost always the case because we're all imperfect. You know, we're all going to transgress at some point. My difficulty has always been, where do you draw the line? And I found my line. I mean, my line is very clearly when I find out that someone I know has raped someone, then I don't hang out with that person anymore and I am not their friend. But that's so obvious that I feel like my line should be way back from that, you know? I'm still figuring that out, but something that I figured out through that whole episode with this guy, like, and with finding out this, you know, having these revelations about him, and people were like, you got to be loyal to your friends. And I said, I'm loyal to values, not to people, which sounds harsh, I think. This is maybe part of me being an intense person, but I'm not going to stand by and watch someone treat other people like shit just because they're my quote unquote friend. I think my friends, people who are my friends, we're friends because we have a lot of the same values. So it just doesn't become an issue. They also value not stealing, or, beyond taking like a couple of glasses from the local pub, maybe. I see people still doing that. I'm like, what? Aren't we all in our 30s? Do we still do that? This is very hard because I struggle with this a lot. I struggle with how much to expect from people. I don't want to be the kind of person who's like, one transgression and you're out. I have had people like that in my life who like literally had a girl at uni. We were all in this really close-knit friendship group. This was like, she decided this without sort of communicating it to me as an expectation that to be her friend, I had to call her once a week. I had to call her at least once a week. I couldn't just pick up the phone when she called. I had to call her. And if I was busy for a week, friendship over. And that's what happened between us. And she literally went full scorched earth and wouldn't even acknowledge my presence if we were standing next to each other.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was
university.
Yeah. And she was also like, we were all like 23 and she was like 29. She was like older. Like, it was weird behavior. And it just made me laugh because it was so weird.
Yeah.
And so like almost cartoonish. And by that point she had been like hounding me. So I was like glad she wasn't speaking to me. I was just relieved. And I told her that. She said, if you don't do this, like if you don't act the way I need, like the way I want you to act, then I'm not going to talk to you. And I went, good. Because I was just done. I was just so tired, like there's got to be room for people to be themselves. There's got to be room for like not being a perfect person in your eyes. Like in her eyes, the perfect friend calls her once a week. In my eyes, the perfect friend sometimes is busy. But like, then it's like, okay, so you've got one end of the spectrum that you're willing to tolerate. What's at the other end? And that's where I struggle.
Did you have a third prepared topic you wanted to talk about?
The home environment, because we're in my home environment.
Yes, it's a lovely home environment. It's quite cozy. Do you like it here?
I love it here. Yeah, it's the best place I've ever rented. It's really great.
What do you do to make the place you're living in your home? I
have this big purple chair.
Is that a cushion with Abby and Alana from Broad City on it?
It is.
Nice.
It's fan art.
Yeah.
I'm a big lover of fan art. I have cushions. Like this other one over here is of Jennifer Lawrence's face, and it says "Pizza fixes everything."
Is that a quote from a specific movie?
No. What it is. Thanks for asking. What it is it's fan art of her face in the exact moment in an interview where she said, "Where's the pizza?" which was one of my favorite things for like a couple years ago. It was like my favorite thing ever. And they put a different quote over it, which is, she said in a different interview, "Pizza fixes everything." So it's a nice compilation of pizza-themed Jennifer Lawrence interviews. And somebody once walked in and asked she said, "Is that pillow just your face?" And I said, "Thanks for thinking I look like Jennifer Lawrence." And I mean, she is a problematic fave, but I will defend her love of pizza to the end. I relate to that.
How often do you clean your place?
Not very often.
Do you like cleaning?
Do you know, I actually do. Like specific types of cleaning, but I don't have the energy for them very much. I'm a big lover of dance cleaning, which is where you get like a mop or a broom or a vacuum cleaner and you put on your favorite song and you just dance clean. And I don't mind like wiping surfaces and stuff like that. But
Do you dance wipe?
I'll do, like, I could. I haven't tried it, but like it could be a nice, fusion genre. But yeah, I hate doing dishes. So we have a dishwasher here, which is the best.
Oh, you're so lucky. I haven't had a dishwasher since I lived with my dad.
Yep. No, this is my first adult dishwasher.
I use dishwashing time to listen to ABC Classic FM. That's
great.
It's very soothing.
Is that like, so do you listen live on the radio or do you listen like podcast?
Yeah, on the radio. Yeah, because it's usually at night. And I have this paranoia about making too much noise and bugging my neighbours. And I figure even if this music is going through the wall of my flat, they probably, like orchestral classical music is probably less objectionable than Triple J or something.
It's funny that, isn't it? Like, what's the big difference between classical and, I don't know, dubstep? Why, like, if you play dubstep, you have to, like, know that the people you're with like dubstep. Otherwise, it's fairly acceptable for them to be like, turn this shit off.
I think I know what this is.
But not with classical.
No, I think I can pinpoint this exactly, actually, because on the tram on the way here, because, people in Melbourne are so much more stylish than in Brisbane. There's less of
ridiculously so.
The stylish people in Brisbane are self-conscious about trying to copy something else.
Yes.
Like they're a stylish people, but they're not individualistic.
But they're walking around like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Whereas in Melbourne, like even the roughest looking people have such flair.
They look so cool.
They look so cool.
Like the greasy hair and the big jumpers, and they look cool.
Yeah. But so I was on the tram on the way here, and there was a couple, and the guy was playing something on his mobile phone. Like he was showing a woman a YouTube video. And normally, that's one of the most annoying things to do on public transport, is to have those tinny speakers playing music. But he was playing something. It sounded almost like opera. It was a woman's voice that was very kind of soaring and melodic. And like even people's annoying public transport behavior in Melbourne is cooler than in Brisbane, because in Brisbane, that would be a bunch of school kids playing some trap, beep, boop, 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 beep, bloop, bloop music.
And or the worst, watching reaction videos.
Oh, yes. To get back to the classical music thing, I think it's as simple as there's no percussion in most classical music.
I never thought of that.
I think the constant beat as, a car with its open windows drives by you I think that's the most annoying thing.
Yeah, we get that a lot here because we're right, like our balcony overlooks a big intersection. So, people will stop at the red light with their windows down and then, Saturday night. And that's what's today, Saturday. That's going to be happening tonight. Luckily, I like a lot of top 40 music. Like, I don't find it that objectionable. So if somebody's like pumping Swish Swish Bish, I'm not too fussed. I mean, it would be nicer if they were cranking out like Mozart or something, I guess. Can I tell you about the car thing though? The weirdest thing that happens with people, like, it's not music. The most annoying thing that people crank from their cars is when they've got their phone connected to Bluetooth and it rings.
Yes.
And it's just like a giant ringing phone driving around.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Why would you have your windows open when you're trying to make a phone call?
I have so many questions about what those people are doing. But I'll be waiting at the lights, waiting to cross the road, and I'll just hear this like brr, brr, and I'm like, ah. It's the funniest, weirdest 21st century phenomenon to me. It's just giant ringing phones driving around.
Sam and I also lived above an intersection.
I remember that was a loud road.
Yeah, it was. Although the cars probably weren't the worst thing. I think the foot traffic was worse.
Yeah.
Because we were living between a backpackers and the train station.
Oh, no.
To get to the valley, they went and got the train.
And you were sort of between West End and the valley a little bit. You were there inner city. And the walls echoed, the exterior walls echoed very badly across the road. So the slightest conversation right out the front, you could hear. Oh, that's uncomfortable. We got a weird phenomenon in this apartment where the kitchen is the most inner part of the apartment. But if you stand near the splashback, over the burners, you can hear the cars out on the street, clearer than where we're sitting in the middle of the apartment. So there's some kind of echo effect.
Resonance or...
I don't know, but it's it's so weird. So sometimes I'll be boiling, waiting for the kettle to boil, and I'll just hear it'll sound as if there are cars right there in my kitchen. It's really weird. But it doesn't sound that way when I'm sitting on the sofa. How did we get to this?
We're talking about the home environment.
Yeah. Did you have any other questions for me?
Yeah, so I guess spending as much time at home as you have to, much as, your home is a place that you have made, do you ever feel kind of trapped by it?
Yes, all the time. All the time. All the time. Trapped is a big word that comes up in my daily journals. Yeah, no, I feel trapped a lot.
Is there anything you can do to kind of counteract that? Like, I don't know, rearrange the furniture all the time? Or, I mean, that's probably difficult as well.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a big furniture rearranger, but we're in kind of like a small space now, so it's like there's no other way you can have the furniture. But I hang out by the windows a lot, and what else do I do? Like, I try to put as much nice stuff on the walls, like stuff that's really like calming and nice to look at. I haven't really done it yet here because it's a really nice apartment and I'm afraid to put anything on the walls. What do I do? I have a really nice bed. It's the most expensive thing I've ever bought and it's 100% worth it. That helps a lot. When I had a really crappy bed that I bought off the side of the road that was like sleeping on a rock and was too short for me because I'm 6'1", that I didn't notice how bad it was getting. Like, I just didn't notice how much pain I was in, how bad my life was. And then when I bought this bed, I was like, oh my God, my quality of life went up like 50%. Yeah, just things like blankets everywhere, comfortable seating, tissue boxes, pillows. I've got flowers on the coffee table right now. I know this is like so Pinterest 2015, but I'm really into hygge.
What is that?
Hygge? It's, I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's a Swedish word, spelled Hygge, and it's sort of basically like being comfortable. Like, it's like the Swedish notion of like coziness, and it's lovely. It's like a thing that you do to make your life better, I guess, or just like it's just like we all should try and be more like the Swedes. Probably in all ways except racial relations, I imagine. But I think there's like this Western, possibly American ideal that I grew up with. Maybe not American, probably more Australian, to be honest. Americans are pretty big on hospitality and comfort, but Australians aren't. Like, it's not so much of a like expected thing. It's like a luxury. To live really comfortably is like to have little things that aren't necessities, that aren't strictly functional, seems to be a bit more taboo here. I don't know why. I don't know what that is. And maybe I'm wrong, but that has been my general experience being raised by Americans who were like, let's be really comfortable. And then I'd go visit, like, Australians would come over and be like, why you got all this stuff everywhere? Like, or I'd go to friends' places and they'd be like, I don't know, it just, yeah, it wasn't, they're not as big on comfort. Could
part of that be like a bit of a working class thing?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
if you mob here pre-flash, got money to throw around on a
100%,
nice clock.
100%. Yeah. It's like if you got it from anywhere pricier than Kmart, then you're a what's the word? I'll think of it halfway through another conversation. It's like I keep thinking Malcolm Turnbull. I just keep thinking, what do you call Malcolm Turnbull?
You're a Turnbull.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you must be nice. It's like that sort of thing, which I feel myself pushing back against a lot, like, because I do live on a low income. And so when people I have that weird conversational tick of when people compliment something I got, I'm like, it was a gift.
Really?
Yeah, I'll do that kind of thing. It's really bad. Or like I've got flowers in here, which I never usually have. Like, I have a bouquet of flowers in a vase. And like someone came over yesterday and I was like, they were a gift. Like, I just want you to know I would never buy flowers for myself, which I think is so sad. And like that I have that instinct.
Who bought you flowers?
My children did. Not my children, but I was teaching some year 8s and 9s creative writing.
Oh, that's nice.
And they thanked me and bought me flowers and wrote me a card. It's really sweet.
Are they roses?
No, I believe those are...
They are red and white.
Oh, no, those are roses. You're right. Is white roses and then whatever these are, these red things, which are like chrysanthemums or something.
They bought you white roses. Do they know how big a Hunger Games fan you are?
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Oh, and they do know. I think they know. Although it was so weird working with them. I don't know. What am I, like 16, 17, 18 years older than them? And one of the girls was like, I was like, so what are you really into? And she was like, Harry Potter. And I was like, no way, me too. And like my context of being really into Harry Potter is I read each book as it came out. I waited for the bookstore to open to get the new, you know what I mean? Like, and then like I saw every film at the premiere. Like that's like my level of being into Harry Potter. And also talking about it all the time and relaying everything in my life back to Harry Potter. And like, she was like, yeah, I'm really into Harry Potter. And I was like, oh. And she's like, I haven't read all the books yet. And I haven't seen any of the movies. And I was like, and then I realized it's because they're too old for her. Like, and I was just like, what? She's like, yeah, my older sister's like going to lend me the third book soon. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, why did I think that every kid born after Harry Potter came out was just born having read Harry Potter? Why did I just assume that? It's like baked into their world. It's like it isn't.
I think children's books are a bit more, they do have more longevity like that. Like there are a few generations after that still, like after the Narnia books came out or something in the 50s, there was still quite a few generations who grew up with them.
Yeah, I read them when I was 19. Loved them. As a friend constantly makes fun of me, I love children's books. But yeah, I love Hunger Games. And it's weird talking to these girls that I was teaching and realizing that maybe Hunger Games was too intense for them, like too old for them.
It is pretty intense. There's a lot of grisly war stuff in there, like the Tomorrow When the War Began series.
Tomorrow When the War Began, I read that in my early 20s for the first time. I think I was a little bit traumatized. And I was an adult.
They're full on. Especially, did you read
the Ellie Chronicles?
Yeah.
That was
first
what
fucking
really
chapter
fucked
of
me
that
up.
one. Jesus Christ.
Oh, we don't want to do spoilers, but it's intense.
We can do spoilers. I can give a warning in the intro.
Okay, all right. Well, her parents get fucking murdered. And then the kid that she's like fostering gets snatched.
Yeah, and she has to go save him. Yeah.
I mean, do you know, like, out of all that, the sad thing is that this is probably just reflection of the fact that I was like 21 when I read them and obsessed with boys, is that the thing that bothered me and traumatized me the most in that whole series was when Lee cheated on Ellie.
Not when her parents were murdered. Not when Australia
It was a war.
over.
You expect that. But what the fuck, Lee? What the fuck? I'm still not okay. I'm still not okay with it. You know, and she took him back. Fucking Lee. All right, but I know that you wanted to talk about Hunger Games.
Well, yeah, because I'd never read any of the books or watched any of the movies as they all came out in the last 10 years or so. But I just thought, because a friend of mine moved to Sydney and he left me some of his books when he moved. He left me the first and the third Hunger Games books.
Well, they are the only good ones.
I did read the second in between.
Oh, no, actually, that was a good one. It was a good movie.
And in the last few weeks, I binged all 4 movies as well.
Yeah.
But because it's a phenomenon, they had their peak. I need someone to talk.
Yeah.
To be brief with about them.
Let's go. Let's do this.
All right. So, did you like the movies?
Yes, very much. I thought the original Hunger Games movie, like the first Hunger Games movie, was excellent. And how do I put this? Like a good standalone film?
Yes.
But then after that, they very much felt like sequels. But I also think Catching Fire was the strongest film.
Overall, it's stronger than the first.
Strongest sequel, definitely. It was my favorite. Maybe that's what I mean. It's my favorite. I go back to it the most. There's a lot in it that is allowed, like, has the time to unravel because you've already, like, introduced the premise of the world and the characters in the first movie. And then the second movie, you get to see more of, like, Peter's integrity being put to test. You get to see more of, like, what it looks like in the other districts, like what the centralization of power and the exploitation of the workers sort of looks like in this very sort of dystopian world. I want to say not just dystopian, but like very uncomplicatedly dystopian.
Yeah.
You know,
like there's not a lot about President Snow's motives.
You know what I like though is that he is presented as like bad, but maybe not the worst. Does that make sense? Like,
in what way?
I think for me there was always the case of like, how much is he lying and how much is the truth? Because I think that sometimes when he says like to Katniss, like, and this isn't to give him like rewards for not wanting to kill a teenage girl, but when he says like, I don't want to kill you and I want us to be friends, I think he was maybe sincere. And like the books are, and maybe the films are like kind of ambiguous enough to show. I think what's good about it is it just does show that tyrants are often very charismatic and charming, and they can be very persuasive, not just violently, but like you can see how people might get taken in, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not saying he was like a good person and that he was justified. I'm just saying that like he definitely probably thought he was justified, but also they talk a lot about the time before peace, like the chaotic time. And I don't know, you do wonder if he thinks that like, maybe he thinks he's seen something worse than the current situation.
And there's a whole thing in the books about like, is he a vampire? With the thing with the blood on his lips and stuff.
I never thought that he might be a vampire.
I never quite understood that. I think I sometimes blur what was made explicit and what wasn't in the books or the movies. But I think in the movies, it was suggested that after a lifetime of poisoning his opponents, he himself had to ingest a bunch of poisons and had some condition relating to that.
Yeah, I thought it was like he has constant open sores in his mouth.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if it was like a Princess Bride thing where it's like he had developed a resistance to iocane powder or something.
Right.
Like I couldn't tell if it was like that kind of thing or if it was like that he would put the poison in his mouth and then spit it out once he realized it was poison. And then it would just injure his mouth. I don't know.
When I was reading the third book, because I didn't know the plot as it was going in, like I kept myself spoiler free over the years.
Yeah.
Like all I ever seen was a few trailers for the movies, I think. It was even, as I was watching the movies, it was a really fun surprise to find out who they cast in all these roles.
Oh, yeah.
If
there was some good casting.
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth Banks was fantastic.
Wasn't she amazing?
Especially in the second one. They gave her a bit more to do in that, which I think was a really good move.
I think that her drawing Katniss and Peter's name from like the nearly empty bowl.
Yeah.
And that look on her face was really powerful. Yeah. And I love the Effie character because she is the bridge between District 12 and the Capitol. And Katniss is very much our way into the story and understanding the world. But Effie is like completely privileged, or as far as we know, has like completely like taken in the Capitol's, has drunk the Kool-Aid of the Capitol, believes in it, has lived in her own bubble, and like just like desensitized herself to the horrible working conditions out in the districts. But she actually becomes like an activist, like in the books, not in the movies so much, a little bit. I don't know. I hate to say this because right after I just defended President Snow, but she like humanizes really, really, really privileged people. Oh God, I regret saying that. But like, that's what's so good about the Hunger Games is that Katniss starts to realize that it's not like good people and bad people, and that trauma isn't simple, that you don't just recover from war. It's like, it's very nuanced.
It did make me wonder as Effie seemed to be taking it so hard, like especially in Catching Fire once Katniss had to go into the second Hunger Games for the Quarter Quell, and she seemed genuinely upset about it. But yeah, it made me wonder because for how many years has she been part of this? How many teenagers has she helped send off to their deaths? Like, is she like this with all of them? Is she being genuine, or is this all just an act?
And you start to wonder if she holds herself separate to it all because that's the only way she can cope with her role, which is not necessarily okay. But then in the books, you start realizing that maybe we don't know how deep she was in on the revolution the whole time, on the rebellion. But I think what I was trying to get at is, like with humanizing her, is that maybe not that it shows her in a good light, but it shows the way people who are benefiting from all this privilege, it might show them how they're deceiving themselves. They might see themselves in Effie Trinket, and the way she only starts caring once she's made a personal attachment to Katniss and Peter. That's when she really cares about the games, and that's when it really becomes awful to her, is not when she sends children off to be killed, but when her friends have to go. And I think it comes back to what we were saying before of like, if you are okay with bad stuff happening, as long as it's not happening to you and your friends, or as long as it's not you and your friends doing it, you know what I mean? Then it's like, it's fine, and I'll just let it happen. That like, it starts to become more of like she sort of gets taken into the cause and starts to realize that like, if Katniss and Peter are great people, maybe I have sent other great people to die.
As an author, as a writer, and as a consumer of pop culture, how did you find the narrative structure of the books? And the movies follow them pretty closely, so it's basically the same thing.
So I was really interested in the use of threes, like of thirds, in the way the trilogy was constructed. So it's a trilogy, and then each book is like split quite interestingly into 3 parts. I think it started to fall apart in the second one. Started to fall, I think like the third one, this is pretty like, I think, accepted in the Hunger Games fandom that it was clear that that Suzanne Collins kind of wrote it in a hurry. It sort of feels like it. She does sort of jam a lot in there, but I really like the way she structures each story around a Hunger Games. So you've got the first Hunger Games that Katniss is in, and then you've got the second one that's the Quarter Quell, and then you've got the third book is conceptually meant to be shaped around them going through the Capitol, which is its own Hunger Games, but she kind of takes a while to get to that, and you can see that in the movies. That's why they split it into two, so it drags a little bit.
And there's that whole part in Mockingjay where they go to District 2 and they bomb the mountain and everything, and that it's such an odd thing to do. The only thing it establishes is how ruthless Gale has become, it seems.
Yeah.
It seems like that was the purpose of it. It doesn't really serve any more dramatic purpose, really. And it's more, I feel like it's more obvious in the movie because it's so quick that they get there, they make a decision, they bomb the thing, she gets shot, she's back out.
Yeah, and like in the movies, you really see how it sort of has become like, and then this happened, and then that happened.
Oh, totally, yeah. Especially in Mockingjay Parts 1 and 2. It's like, it's not even like a movie in its structure. It's a checklist.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is.
This happened in the book, so we've got to put it in the movie now.
Catching Fire was my favorite movie, I think, because, I mean, just like looking at it as a film, I really like the sets and the costumes. I think they had a new director who directed the rest of the films in the second film, so it looks kind of more like a blockbuster, whereas the first one was more gritty.
And I think that's why I like the first one more, because of its look. And even though the CG...
It's got that indie look a little bit.
It does, yeah. And it especially like those opening scenes that are set in... Was it shot in Georgia? Or
I think
North Carolina or somewhere?
No, I think it was Georgia.
Yeah, but it had that look because... It looked quite different to how I pictured it in my mind when I was reading the books. I was picturing something more like, even though I know it's a kind of a post-apocalyptic future that it's set in, I was imagining the District 12 to be looking more like kind of a medieval village as a coal mining town. But in the movie, it's like a traditional American South sort of, things are spread out a bit, and like all the houses are falling down, and it's very American in its look. Like there's no mistaking it.
No, and I think that might have been intentional. Hunger Games is like, what is it called? Pan Am is like a post-apocalyptic America, which is part of why there was such an outcry about the casting of so many white people. Like, it's like, like, yes, there are white people in America, but there's also lots of other people.
Except for like in the movies, the one black district that Rue and Thresh are from.
And like District 12 in the books was meant to be more of a district of people of color as well. But I guess they cast Jennifer Lawrence, and then that sort of had a knock-on effect, I think, as these things often do if you center a white character as a protagonist.
The music in the first movie also really contributed to that feel as well. I believe T. Burn Bonnet he kind of curated the soundtrack, and it was all a bit, that sort of southern, a little bit country, a little bit Appalachian folk stuff. And that I was, watching the credits, and then, there's some country music playing, and once it actually got to the music credits, I was like, oh, that was Taylor Swift. She was still country. Oh, I forgot about that.
So beautiful. A friend recently asked me, so a lot of people know that I'm obsessed with Taylor Swift, and a friend recently asked me, have you heard that Taylor Swift song she did for the Hunger Games? And I was like, have you met me? Do I know about the Taylor Swift song she wrote for the Hunger Games? Yes. It's called Safe and Sound, and she's barefoot in the music video, and it's beautiful. Yeah, like they did some really cool things with the films that I was really meant a lot to me. Like, I love this thing of YA films where they will have soundtracks. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Twilight started it. They'll have a soundtrack where they get all these really cool bands to write songs inspired by the franchise.
I would point to an earlier example being the Spider-Man trilogy, the Sam Raimi ones.
Oh.
They had really cool indie rock soundtracks like that in the early 2000s with like...
But had those bands written the songs for Spider-Man?
I think some of them were, because they were definitely tracks that you couldn't get on an album. There was like Yeah Yeah Yeahs and Killing Heidi and...
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I must have been like, I don't know, I guess I wasn't into the soundtrack thing at that time, but I got really into it with Twilight, don't judge me, because the Eclipse soundtrack is so cool.
Metric had a great song for Eclipse.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
And there's like Licky Lee, there's Death Cab for Cutie, who's one of my longtime favorites, and all these other ones. Yeah, and it was great. Because the thing is that I love the aesthetic of Twilight, the kind of like Washington State, gloomy gray, and then the kind of those, what's the guy's name? Andre Desplat, like, you know, pianos. Like, I love that aesthetic that they built with it. The story is fucked. And the acting is so. But the aesthetic's great. And I think maybe like the aesthetic of Catching Fire really appealed to me because I think that was the one where they had Lorde curate the soundtrack, and that was just incredible. And having I think at the time she was like 17, having a 17-year-old girl curating the soundtrack of a story about a 17-year-old girl survive, like these two powerful women, it meant a lot to me. And Taylor Swift is very famous for that too, of like writing about the teenage girl experience as a teenage girl, not from a condescending outsider viewpoint, like as teenage girls often get treated, but like from a self-reflective insider's viewpoint. And I think that teenage girls are incredible and going to save the world. And that's what like that movie meant to me, really.
Have you heard Lorde's new album?
Do you know me? Yes, I have, many times.
I've just started listening to it over the last 2 weeks, and like probably heard it like only 3 or 4 times. Every time I've started to cry.
Yeah. What about it affects you?
I just love a good breakup album.
Right.
I love hearing them. Yeah, it totally is. Yeah, and my 2 favorite kinds of albums are breakup albums and albums in general that have a really strong sense of character.
Yes, I love that. And a cohesive album.
I like an artist where every new album feels like you're tuning into like a new sequel in a movie series.
Yeah.
There are a few artists who do that really well. I think Megan Washington did that really well for her first 2. Not her third one was a bit more generic, but Kanye West does that really well.
Yeah. I love the ongoing Kanye West story that he tells. Yeah.
Lorde has, I think, definitely proven to do that. And you just see, you know, it's like, it was a bit of a long time between albums for her.
4 years, yeah.
But on Melodrama, you see what she tells you what she was doing. And she was living this life in New York and, you know, holding up in...
Or Auckland as well, I think.
In Auckland, yeah. And there's something about the vocal takes that... Because I believe she made a lot of it with producer Jack Antonoff in the apartment that he shares with his partner, Lena Dunham.
Yeah.
And you can hear that it's not in a studio. It's just in a real room. She's like right up on this mic. And even though there's a lot of really processed vocals in the bunched vocals where she's her own choir, the lead vocals on a lot of songs are so raw and right there, even though there's this fantastic production going on. It's I love it. Lorde is the Mockingjay.
Yeah, that's the thing.
She's our Mockingjay in the real world. Like she's
I'm going to cry. You're completely right.
And I would follow her in a revolution.
100%. Like recently she got in trouble. She got like called out for like saying that being friends with famous people was like being friends with someone with an autoimmune disease. And then a lot of people who don't have autoimmune diseases or famous friends started going, oh, that's inappropriate. And I was like, I got like a couple, like I got like at least one very famous friend, and I also have an autoimmune disease and friends with autoimmune diseases. And I was like, no, it's legit. Because like the thing is that like I got people were like they want to find a reason to tear her down, you know what I mean? And like, I'm not saying like haters gonna hate. I'm all for like critical enjoyment of pop culture icons, but this I think was like blown out of proportion because people wanted to find something, they wanted her to fuck up, you know? And like they were like waiting for this 20-year-old girl who's just been so poised through this ridiculous career so far. They wanted to fuck up. You know, so that they can be like, oh, she's just going to go off the rails, just like they all do. Like they do that with Taylor Swift too. They want to like find some reason to discover that she's actually a snake. She's actually, you know, they call her on Twitter the heir of Slytherin.
The what?
The heir of Slytherin.
Oh, okay.
Which is actually quite appropriate because she's like the most ambitious and controlled person.
Yeah, like people keep expecting her to be Lindsay Lohan, but she's not. She's Jay-Z.
Yeah, which is almost, I think, scarier for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's like, okay, she's not Lindsay. Taylor Swift by this point, and probably Lorde as well, have proved that they're not Lindsay Lohan, which, like, that's harsh on Lindsay Lohan, but whatever. Mean Girls was a great film. Like, she was amazing.
Just as a shortcut to the type of stereotype that we're referring to.
Yeah, it's always like a Girls Gone Wild sort of stereotype, where they take drugs and don't brush their hair and fall apart, which is like the worst thing a woman can do. And Lorde and Taylor Swift have proven themselves to be true artists and businesswomen. And that seems almost more threatening to a lot of people. Like, they would prefer them to be Britney's. I also respect Britney. Respect. I forgot where I was going with this. Like, Lorde is just so... like, when she said that autoimmune disease thing, she wrote on Twitter that, like, she'd fucked up. And I was like, that's such a Lorde response to being called out. Because when I read that, I was like, people were like, oh, that's a thoughtless comment. And I was like, but see, I don't think that she would have said that if she hadn't thought it through. I'm not saying she's perfect, but she's at least someone who definitely overthinks things. You can tell the way, when you read the whole interview, you can tell that the way she said it, it was something she'd thought about for a while. And I trust her literacy, I think. Like, I trust her engagement with the world enough to maybe make a more generous assumption about what she was saying. I just think that was what bothered me, is that people jumped to the most ungenerous assumption. Just in that case, it bothered me. Mostly when celebrities fuck up, I'm like, yeah, they fucked up. Like, Taylor Swift has fucked up so much in the sense of, like, not thinking things through. Like, when she replied to Nicki Minaj on Twitter and was like assumed that Nicki's critique of a culture that centers white thin bodies was all about Taylor Swift. And it's like, Taylor, mate, nah, it's not all about you. That was embarrassing. As a Swiftie, I was very embarrassed in that moment. And have been more since, like, and probably will be more again, you know. So I'm all for critical engagement, but I think Lorde freaks people out because she is so thoughtful and considered and, like, a really committed artist, like, committed to her own voice. That's what freaks people out about Taylor Swift. That's what freaks people out about any woman who's, like, committed to her own vision, in my opinion.
Do you think Suzanne Collins should have committed to her own vision before she finished writing Mockingjay, perhaps?
I can't comment on that. I don't know what she was going through. You know, she's a writer. Who knows? Maybe she needed to, like, pay for medical bills and needed to get a book out. I don't know. Like, Lorde had the opportunity to completely commit to her own voice. You know what I mean? So did Taylor. Lorde got discovered at like 14 or something, and then, like, developed like a musical mentor. I can't remember the whole situation, but like Taylor Swift was, like, born to, like, a stockbroker, like, wealthy parents, you know, wealthy enough to like give her all the opportunities and move to Nashville and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they had, like, the opportunity to completely commit to their own voice that a lot of men have had, and that often gets erased. Like, when men are, like, really committed artists, like, people talk about Hemingway all the time, and I'm like, bitch, like, you know, like, he was awful to the people around him. Like he was, like, in many ways awful, and in many ways didn't take care of himself because he didn't have to, because a woman would do it. You know what I mean?
You know what disappointed me most about Ernest Hemingway, and it actually ruined an evening for me once, is when I found out he never actually said write drunk, edit sober.
Oh, really?
He never said that.
Was it just
attributed to him? I think it was just an anonymous thing.
Huh.
So disappointing.
Oh.
I mean, you know, his appalling behaviour towards women and a kind of warmongering, adventurous spirit, they were bad too.
Yeah. But you really wanted him to be a drunk writer. No,
I'm sure he was, but that he never put it so pithily.
Yeah. He didn't, I don't know. Didn't strike me as a pithy guy, which I know I've just, like, angered a lot of Hemingway bros. But I couldn't get through The Old Man and the Sea. Couldn't get through it.
Really?
Yeah. When The Sun Also Rises.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Ugh. That woman was so not written well. Like, I just couldn't get through it. Didn't care enough about some guy's fifis. And that's just maybe something I'm going through. I just said, like, a couple years ago, I reached breaking point with how much of culture is about a white man's fifis. And, like, that's legit. That's a story. But it's the story that we hear so much. And, like, I have definitely read, I mean, of course, because you have to, I've read so many stories that center white men and their feelings and their personal journeys, and I've been incredibly moved by them, obviously. Like, I was a literature lover from way back, so I mean, I cut my teeth on, like, Jack London and all those kind of, you know, amazing stories. Like, I don't know, like, was The Wolf a white man? I mean, let's assume Were those dogs white men? Really? Probably proxies for white men. But white dogs, it's not a sense of like not caring about white men. It's just not only caring about white men. That's why it was so exciting to read and watch the Hunger Games, and then to like listen and know that the music was produced, like was curated by someone going through the teenage girl experience, and to like actually recognize my own experiences in that art. Incredible, just incredible. I can't explain what it means to me. Like sometimes I just think about the Mockingjay and just start crying. And the thing is that it's like a young, beautiful white woman. So it's like one step away from being a young, beautiful white man. But that's how rare any kind of diversity is that I was like crying over Jennifer Lawrence being the hero instead of, I don't know, whoever the Vogue white guy is at the moment.
There are two scenes in the first movie as well that were so gripping, that Jennifer Lawrence was so great in, that I don't think they captured again in the later movies. The first was where she's been picked and she's at the train station about to go, and she talks to her mother for the last time. And she grabs her and says, "You can't fall apart again. You have to look after Prim." And in the movie, you don't have the context of knowing what happened when her father died, when her mother broke down. In the book, I believe it's explained by that point.
Yeah.
But the way she does it, you get everything about this young woman that, she's been the provider. She's been running the shop.
Yeah.
Now she has to go away. So she has to make it real clear.
Yeah.
This is what you got to do.
Because sometimes YA dystopian films only people their worlds with teenagers and never really like position you to think, why aren't the parents helping? You know, like where are the adults? Not that teenagers can't do stuff, but it's like in the real world, there's more diversity of ages of people around you usually, which I think like stuff like Divergent, I just can't get into as much, but I think they're meant to be more of a literal metaphor for high school, but I don't think that's what Hunger Games is doing. It's more, if anything, its central theme is PTSD, which is really interesting for a teenage story. Seeing, Katniss have to take up all these leadership roles just because she can, just because she's able, even though she doesn't really want them, but she is the only one around her that's strong enough to do it, so she just does it. Like, I'm gonna cry. It's so... Like, you never get to see women in those kind of roles. Like, it's just so good. Yeah, and that moment where, like, she tells her mom, like, she just takes her mom by the shoulders. And that's, as far as she knows, she's off to her death. And the last thought isn't about herself. It's about her sister. And I'm going to cry now. I love the Hunger Games.
The second scene was when they're doing the interviews with Caesar Flickerman, and Peter's just declared his love for Katniss on stage, and he gets off and she smashes him against the wall.
Him.
Like,
yeah.
What the fuck were you doing?
I love that, because I think a lot of representation of teenage girls that we see in movies is that they would be, if not actively flattered by a boy saying that he loved them, that they would just be like kind of like neutral about it maybe. But like Katniss reacted the way I would have reacted, which is, what the fuck was that about? Like, A, why would you not bring this up to me in private before? And then like, B, you made me look weak. When she says that, I was like, yes, this is a nuance that a lot of male writers, I guess, and just other writers don't get about teenage girls, is that like, yeah, like you can be interested in boys but not want to be completely defined by your relationship to them. I think I felt that way without even being conscious of feminism. I just knew that I wanted to be a person, and that I hated the way it felt when you get shunted to the side as now you're just the object of interest or disinterest in my case. Like Katniss got dolled up and then made into a sex object quite consciously by her team so that she would be more valuable to the capital citizens. And that's something that happens to teenage girls, is like, you have to have a makeover to be all that.
I really liked in the books that having the first person perspective they did, that we could really see all of Katniss's thought processes in the Hunger Games as a reality television event, and like how the psychology of like, she knew what she was doing in everything she did because she was constantly being watched.
Yeah.
I guess necessarily that's harder to show on film. And yeah, sometimes I wonder if I'd seen the films first, would I have gotten everything?
No, I don't think you would. Like, for example, something about the first film that always bothers me. So in the book, they obviously, because it's the first person, she can explain this to you in the book. It's like a conscious strategy between Katniss and Haymitch that for him to get sponsors, like, you know, rich people in the capital watching, they have to like Katniss enough to send her medicine, food, whatever, things that'll help her. And Haymitch is kind of like the whip. He's like whipping the votes almost for her. But to do that, she's got to perform a certain kind of narrative for them. And part of that is being a love interest. So there's got to be a romance between her and Peter. And she's not comfortable with this at all. She's not interested in having this kind of relationship yet with anybody. And is extremely uncomfortable with like kissing and stuff like that. And it's so horrible watching that or reading that and watching it, like knowing that like that's pretty much what I went through, and I'm probably what most young girls go through, and boys as well. It's like anybody of any gender, it's like you get pressured into this thing really early. But anyway, she's aware that she's being watched and that everything is being heard and seen. Everything she sees is being seen by everyone in the Capitol and everywhere. And then in the movie, like Haymitch sends down like soup, and the implication is that if she can kiss Peter better, more convincingly, she'll get actual helpful medicine instead of just soup. But in the movie, they put a little note from Haymitch saying, "You call that a kiss?" or something like that. And I'm like, well, that would blow the whole strategy, because the cameras would see the note and then it wouldn't seem like a sincere kiss, because everyone would know that she's trying to convince them that. So it bothered me. It's still just lay awake at night thinking about that little fortune cookie note that just said like, you know, you can do better than that or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, be more obvious. Like you're blowing the strategy, Haymitch.
Even though the first one was my favorite, one of the coolest moments in the four movies, I think, was in Catching Fire, when she's rising into the arena.
Yeah.
And the aspect ratio of the whole movie changes.
Yeah.
Like until then it's been 35 mil or whatever. And then as you're watching it, the borders of your screen go up, and and everything that happens in the arena was shot in IMAX.
Do you know I never noticed that?
Oh, it's incredible.
That explains a lot. The feeling is completely different in the arena.
It is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then
the colors are different? Sorry, yeah.
And then when she wakes up on the hovercraft at the end, it's instantly...
It feels more claustrophobic.
Yeah, it's instantly back to the first aspect ratio with the letterboxes.
Wow. You know, I'm going to have to go rewatch it for a 17th time. That whole scene where Cinna gets assumedly murdered is hard to watch. But when she pops out of that tube into the island, watching her pull herself together is incredible. And I've related to few female characters on screen the way I relate to Katniss, because she reacts to stuff a lot of the way I would react, which is to say, like, I was the eldest child, I guess. I mean, like, I don't know. I just have that personality where if there's like, if I would just get it done. Does that make sense? Like, I can imagine, like, I would definitely be like in emergency and trauma situations, sometimes people don't know that I'm in an emergency because I go really quiet and like, what's the word? Not like efficient, but like very clipped almost. I just go down to like the least amount of energy that I can use and like can start going into like conserve and survive mode. And watching Katniss do that, where she's like, she just witnessed one of her dearest friends get bashed and you assume killed in front of her. And she couldn't do anything to stop. And you know that her whole thing is saving people, right? Like, and protecting everyone. And she couldn't protect him. And that was done to fuck up her mind. And then she's got to like now try and either kill or be killed. And she doesn't know where she is or what's about to happen. And she just pulls it the fuck together. And like, there's this little detail where right before she dives into the water, she tucks her hair behind her ears. And that is like one of those weird little details where I'm like, they did a good job with this film. Because a lot of times when women are being directed, I just feel like people don't know what it's like being a woman sometimes when you watch a movie, because it's like, that's not how our hair acts. Like, I was even watching Kong Skull Island last night, and Brie Larson is in it, and they all get in a helicopter, and the rest of them are wearing like I think Tom Hiddleston's not wearing a helmet, but he's got his like short gelled hair or whatever. And she just got like this long blonde, like elbow length hair, just like whipping around in this storm in a helicopter. And I'm like, she would definitely tie her hair back, because like she's a professional photographer, and like now her hair is in her face. And also it's just like gonna get caught in something. Like, and anyway, just watching like Katniss just tuck her hair behind her ears and get ready to dive in, I was like, yeah, that's what you would do. Like, she's not thinking about it. It's just like, I don't know, that's what you do, right?
One of the things that surprised me about the movies, I think, was the casting and the characterizations of Peter and Gale. Because as I was reading the books, I would have basically swapped both what they looked like and their characters. That's what I had in my head.
That's
from the
interesting.
books. Like, I pictured Gale as the, I guess, quieter, bit smaller, the smaller person. I pictured Peter as more of a bit of a brute.
I did picture Peter as bigger. I think that Josh Hutcherson was probably a little bit on the slight side to play Peter, because he's meant to be like this baker's son who can throw bags of flour and stuff. And I mean...
And who kills people with his bare hands in the games.
And it is hard to imagine Josh Hutcherson doing that. But I think that, you know, the joy that Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson have given the world on press junkets far outweighs any other casting choice they could have made. I think they got Gale pretty much right. But the thing they did with Peter in the films that annoyed me was that they made him he negged her a bit. And like, that's not Peter. Peter's meant to be, in a way, he's meant to be kind of like pure, and Gale is meant to be like have more like mixed morals, maybe more amoral, whereas Peter is very moral. Like, Peter's more sort of sassy in the films, and I was like, nah, that ain't Peter.
Did you have, as it's often reduced to in these young adult series,
I'm Team Peter.
Team Peter.
Yeah.
So were you Team Peter in the books and the movies?
Well, the thing is, right, I'm Team Peter, and I'm also Team Liam Hemsworth. See, that's the thing, is when people ask you like about the movies, it's like, oh, why aren't you Team Gale? What they mean is, how hot is Liam Hemsworth? Which is 100%, yeah, he's gorgeous. Like, and also seems like a really gentle, nice guy, which I think is something that attracts people to the Hemsworths, is like how just sort of like easygoing they seem. You know, they would just definitely invite you to their family's barbecue and like do the steak the way you like it, and like whatever. They would be very like accommodating. It's like hard that like Liam Hemsworth is almost too adorable to play Gale, because Gale needs to be way more tortured. Gale needs to be like, you got to understand, this guy like has been putting his name in like 40 times every year so that he can get food to feed his like 9 siblings or whatever. And he's about to go out into the coal mine so he can support his family. And he's like 18. Like, he needs to not be as fresh-faced as like little Liam's Hemsworth just come from Bondi Beach. Like,
I didn't think he looked, especially by the third movie, he does not look like a teenager in any way, really.
Well, no.
I thought he was a lot less sympathetic in the movies, because I guess you don't get those flashbacks of him and Katniss hunting like you do in the books.
I really thought you were about to say something else just then, instead of hunting.
Flashing.
No, I thought you were going to say humping. I was like, oh, you might have been reading fan fiction.
There weren't any humping scenes in my book that I read.
No, but I recently heard a story of someone who read Harry Potter for the first time, but they had been given fan fiction and they didn't know it.
Oh my God.
And they were like saying to their friend who loved Harry Potter and like didn't know about all this, they were like, yeah, but it didn't make sense. Like, the movies never go into how like Draco and Harry kept hooking up in the toilets, and like, and the friend's like, what? What did you read? So I was just wondering if you read like a you know, a black market PDF of Hunger Games. And
maybe. Well, the Catching Fire one I read was an ebook, so maybe.
Yeah, I read them off ebooks, so I sometimes wonder like, what, did I read fan fiction? I would read that fan fiction, but I think what they do in movies is like possibly why they cast older people to play teenagers, probably a lot of like legal reasons for like just production.
Child labor laws, yeah.
Yeah, but also I think like in the books, when you get into their heads more, they feel older than maybe they would look, because you're getting the inside, you're not just seeing the outside, you're getting like the maturity inside them that's come from experience from these kids and living in this like horrible dystopian life, which I think if you interviewed kids like, you know, in like today in the real world coming from those sort of backgrounds, people often describe them as like, you know, being an old soul and stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe like, but maybe it's just experience that has like, people say, oh, they grew up too fast or whatever. And I'm like, how fast are we supposed to grow up? Because I know many 27-year-old guys who still getting there. Like, to me, they should have grown up 10 years earlier when I had to, you know what I mean? But then it's like, well, was my experience the correct experience? Like, I don't know. But yeah, I think that maybe like when you see a movie, you need an actor who can like have that gravitas and like believably show that level of maturity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's hard to find that in a child actor.
Maybe. I mean, unless they're like like creepily like Dakota Fanning or something.
Or
like,
the kid from Logan.
I haven't seen that yet. No spoilers. I know. I haven't had the emotional bandwidth to deal with Logan, but I love Wolverine. Like, he's one of my longtime favorites, and so I'm very excited about it. And I know that I'm way past the point where I can like reasonably ask people not to spoil it for me, because it's been out for so long.
I won't, but if you like Wolverine, I think you'll like this movie.
Yay.
I think like just on a qualitative level, like I don't think it's one of the greatest films ever made, as some people say. I think it should, ideally, this should be the benchmark for a superhero film. This should be considered a good superhero film, and then awesome ones should be fucking Citizen Kane or whatever. As it is, it's
boring
one
movie,
of the best.
yeah.
As it is, well, Logan is one of the best superhero movies, and that's as good as
really?
it is. It's a bit of an indictment.
Better than Batman versus Superman?
Now you're just taking the piss.
This is what we call on Twitter trolling. I am trolling you right now. I'm really excited to watch it. Like, I about the superhero films thing, like, the thing is, like, I'm sort of torn because I think I want them to either be Marvel, like, I want them to either be, like, really kind of, I want to say, like, cartoonish and very symbolic, or I want them to be, like, a really gritty exploration of what it would actually feel like to be that person. Like, what would it actually feel like to be Logan? Like, that's what I think I'm interested in seeing the film for, like, that I think Hugh Jackman and like the team around him are interested in what it would be like to be Logan, as opposed to making him some kind of like avatar for an
Revenge,
analogy
usually.
about or like an analogy about AIDS or something, you know, which is all like really interesting stuff, but like I want the analogy stuff to be done very performatively. Like, I want that to be done in a very sort of like broad brushstrokes, enjoyable adventure way.
Yeah.
I don't want, like, Batman versus Superman was just analogy and violence, neither done well, and none of it making any sense. And it was like, you don't get any real characterization that you want in a gritty film, because otherwise, what's the point? And you didn't get like any affecting analogy out of it, because like it. What was going on in that?
It was a meaningless film.
Yeah.
It didn't have anything to say.
No, it had nothing to say. And I mean, it gave us the Wonder Woman film. It like set us up for Wonder Woman. I mean, did we need to be set up? I don't think so. Like, they could have cut off the beginning and ending of Wonder Woman and just had the film be her in the 40s. That would have been great. Like, but yeah, that was a good film because that was very much like about like the battle for humanity's soul and that kind of thing, but also kind of did ask you to think a little bit about what it would be like to be Diana, but not very much. It didn't go very deep, and I liked that. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to see like really cool shit happen and have like a really cool hero. And she's that kind of hero that I miss. Like, I think we've gone too far into the whole gritty, problematic superhero thing. That's kind of cool, but like, and Wolverine was my original favorite of that sort of character of like, he's kind of a bad guy, but also a good guy. Because, you know, he's kind of like, he's like a good guy who will do whatever it takes. And I feel like he was one of the originals of that. But I love Superman. Like, I love those Ubermenches. I love a hero that is like the perfect ideal to aspire to. And Wonder Woman is totally that.
Because they're the hardest people to be, the paragon.
Yeah. I'm just, I like, if I'm going to see a superhero, if someone's going to be my hero, I want them to be something to really aspire to. I don't necessarily care about Bruce Wayne. I just don't.
It's pretty hard to.
It's really hard to care, especially when Ben Affleck is playing him. Bless his heart. I mean, that guy's got resting dead face.
Resting dead face.
He does. I think he's even admitted in interviews. Like, he doesn't do it on purpose. It's just what he was born with.
Michael Keaton, at least, he's one who was arguably a better Bruce Wayne than he was a Batman. And he was a good Batman.
That makes sense. Like, when I was a kid, I absolutely loved George Clooney as Batman. I mean, people are like, oh, it was the worst. I think even George Clooney's apologized for that film. I liked it because it was pretty much aimed at where I was when I was like 12 or whatever. It was really colorful and over the top and goofy, and I liked that. So yeah, I guess I want them to be like over the top or actually realistic, as in not just realistic violence, but realistic characters as well. Because the violence doesn't really mean much to me if there's not like a narrative purpose for it.
And yeah, I won't say anything about Logan, but the violence is handled well.
I've heard it's very violent.
And differently than the other X-Men films.
That sounds good.
In a good way, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. They've tried to do that a little bit in the Avengers, but like laughably so, where every now and again they'll just have a meeting and talk about how sad it is a building of people died.
Yeah.
And you don't really like see the repercussions, they just talk about them.
Yeah. In Mockingjay, this is probably a really nerdy question, but
yes.
In terms of like the conspiracies that were going on and like...
Do you mean about the books or in the books?
No, in the books.
Right,
sorry.
right.
So like President Coin betraying Katniss and all that kind of thing. So this was a thought I had as I was reading the book, because it kind of went in a different direction I thought it was going to. So in the scene where she's in District 8, where the hospital gets attacked?
I think so.
Yeah, so... The bombers come in from the capital. I thought as more hints came along throughout the book that Coin wasn't necessarily behind Katniss, or that Katniss was expendable, that she had a purpose for Coin and would be thrown away as a martyr at some stage. I thought it was going to be revealed in the big thing that Coin organized the bombing of the hospital.
Ooh.
Because it would have made sense, because they figured out that Katniss couldn't do staged propos in the studio. They didn't work.
Yeah.
That they need to send her out into the field.
They need to actually go and traumatize her.
Yeah. And yeah, I thought that might have even worked, like, because especially in the book, there's so little that goes on to establish Coin as a villain.
Yeah. And then she gets murdered.
And then Katniss kills her at the end based on a few words from Snow.
So true.
And in the movie even, this blows my mind even more in the movie, even though Coin is kind of established as being a bit more villainous, I feel, in the movie. Like, especially like when she gives the big speech, it's like, oh, I will temporarily assume power, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But in the movie...
And all the people sort of doing the military,
yeah.
Like, what were they doing? Like, hoorah, hoorah.
Yeah.
It's like, it was very laid on thick.
Yeah, the like militarism.
Military dictator.
Yeah, that she was just going to be replacing Snow rather than actually leading a new democracy. But in the movie, I can't remember if this happens in the book, but in the movie, when Katniss goes out to the greenhouse and finds Snow, the guards bar her at the start, and then the commander says, no, let her through, she deserves to see whatever's in there.
Yeah.
Now, was it the same commander in the book?
No, I think in the book it was just one of the people who had fought alongside. It was just like they knew, because they all knew who she was.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like they kind of knew what she'd been through. I don't think it was Commander Paler.
Okay.
But I think it's like that thing in the movie they need to like, because the books introduced a lot of characters and then would just kind of drop them.
Yeah.
So I think they tried to fix that in the movie a little bit.
Okay, but this is significant in the movie because it's Paler that lets her in there.
Oh,
even
and
though
then Paler becomes
president. The new president after Katniss assassinates her based on information she gets from having access to the greenhouse.
Oh my God. You're right. I see. I mean, like, in the book, I interpret it as the person who was like, no, let her through, was like, she deserves to kill Snow. Like, I always thought that was pretty strongly implicit. That it's like, maybe she's going to kill him. and that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Like, if she wants to, then she has more of a right than anybody to kill him. Like, I thought that was the implication.
I thought, but she was going to be the one to execute him anyway.
I think that might have been decided afterwards.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, I can't remember. But, like, yeah, that's interesting, because then Plyley becomes... I think that, like, in the movie, they just didn't think it through, because it was just like, we need to get this character in so that at the end, when we reveal her again, it's like, oh, yeah, that person.
Yeah.
Wow, you're just blowing my mind with that. But I think it stays true to the speech by Plutarch. By Plutarch at the end, when he says something along the lines of, oh, there'll be peace for a while, but then we'll go back to being...
People have short memories.
Yeah, that's it. And like, I think that the book was trying to make a point that a revolution often just puts a different dictator at the top. But the people at the bottom don't see much of a change. And so, I mean, like, even if Plyley was behind some huge conspiracy to dethrone both Snow and Coin, amazing. I mean, like, you got to respect that on some level. That's playing the deep game. But I think it still fits with the Hunger Games' sort of central thesis, which is like that people are a bit shit. No, that things are more cyclical with humans. Like, is sort of similar to like how the trauma doesn't ever really go away for Katniss and Peeta. I really hate the way they ended the last film. There are much worse games to play. That was so bad. Like, so bad that I almost gagged in the cinema. I was like, oh, you did so well, and then you did that? That's worse. That's almost as bad as the Harry Potter 19 years later epilogue. But I just play a game to keep myself sane. It's a boring game, but there are much worse games to play. And then roll credits. Like, that's so bad. I feel like my Jennifer Lawrence pillow is looking at me judgingly. I still love you, J-Law. But yeah, it's like, the film's central thesis seems to be that, like, things aren't linear. You know what I mean? It's not like simple. And you experience the trauma, and then as time goes on, you feel better and better about it. Like, in a nice sort of smooth arc down towards having zero trauma. It's the same way that it's like society doesn't inexorably progress upwards towards an ideal. It cycles, and it can lapse really easily. And we're seeing that, I think, more than ever now in the West. Like, it's democracy and stability and all these kind of freedoms that we take for granted, and freedoms doesn't feel right. Human rights are way more fragile than maybe I thought when I was growing up. That's why I think things like The Hunger Games and Tomorrow When the War Began resonate with me so much, because a lot of people are acting like the world only became bad last year. I'm like, dude, you remember 9/11? Even before that, like, there was always like a sense that there was going to be a big war for me. I don't know if that was the same for you.
No, I don't think so. And I still don't think there's going to be a big war, but I am pessimistic about the future. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as World War III. I think that resources are going to get more scarce. I think the social fabric will continue to break down as we've been splintered in these groups, in part aided by technology, in part just because we suck. But I think...
Yeah, we do.
I think we could well get to a dystopian future, but I think it's going to be slow. I don't think it's going to be a big boom. I think the human race, Kaitlyn, is going to die with a whimper, not with a boom.
I agree. And I think the danger is that we've been telling ourselves stories for so long about how things do end with a boom and how it's really obvious when things have gone bad. And we have let ourselves be lulled into thinking that we'll know when things are going bad. And I get really frustrated, like last year, because I'm a US citizen, and so I voted. And like, I don't need to tell you who I voted for. But like last year, I was really stressed before the US election, and a girl I know was like, oh, Kaitlyn, stop it. He's not going to win. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's not, Hillary wasn't up enough in the polls. It wasn't certain enough. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not from America, but like all my family is. And so I've been to America a lot, and I know a lot of people in America, and not just in like New York and LA, but like out in the middle. I've seen things going south, not geographically, but like, you know, for a while. And not even just there, but like maybe it's just because I read a lot of dystopian fiction when I was a kid, but like I've seen a lot of stuff in Australia as well, and it's happening very strongly here, and people aren't paying attention, and it's scary because it's like this is how stuff slips out of our hands, you know, like, and next thing I know, it's like people were all like, oh good, the first article of impeachment has been filed against Trump, woohoo. And I was like, what do you mean woohoo? Then that means President Mike Pence, and then we have full Handmaid's Tale within 4 years. Like, I don't want to be a handmaid. Like, you know, this is all like Margaret Atwood and Octavia E. Butler, who I've just recently started reading, creepily, like accurately, were predicting stuff like this in the 80s and 90s. And we're just like letting each little drop in the bucket fall, and it's really frightening. I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do?
I gave up.
You gave up?
I have given up.
What does that look like for you?
It looks like not having children, not trying to devote my life to save the world. It looks like making myself as comfortable as possible and having a good time. And trying not to accidentally push anyone out of the boat as it sinks. Yeah. I guess.
Kind of just like, you know, you'd be in the band on the Titanic. You'd be like, let's make everyone comfortable.
Yeah. Or not even that, just to make myself feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. So you'd be the old people in the bunk with their fur coats, just wrapping up.
Trying to keep warm.
As the water rises. I'm kidding. Sorry, this is terrible.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like I'm making light of it, but I'm not trying to. Yeah, I think that's... I think that is a legit position to take, and here's why, is because there is an assumption that humanity must always progress upwards, and that any ideal endpoint is with humanity still being like the dominant species on the earth or whatever, or that everything continues the way it has been. And I just don't know if that's true. I just don't know if, like, if you look at natural processes, I don't know if it continuous, as Dick Smith pointed out on Mark Latham's Outsiders the other night. I watched that because apparently I hate myself. The only thing that has continuous growth is a cancer cell, etc. Great analogy. He was talking about immigration, and I
thought you were talking about Mark Latham.
Dick Smith was saying that, like, oh, does he just continuously grow like a cancer cell? He's like cancer because he keeps popping up when you don't expect. You're like, what? I thought you were gone. And
Australia keeps relapsing. We thought we were in Latham remission, but he keeps coming back.
Keeps coming back worse, which is really scary. Oh, this is a horrible analogy. I'm going to get off the cancer thing. I think I feel like I still feel a need to try and save the world, but I don't think there's much wrong with trying to make your experience of it and like the people around you, just trying to get through it, I think is to get through whatever is happening is also legit. For me, the only way I can cope is to think that I'm doing something, but that's my problem.
Kaitlyn, it's been a few years since I've seen you, but I think you've become more of a badass than ever. And you simultaneously have less fucks to give than ever, but the fucks you do give, you give them harder than ever before. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks, Scott. It's been a pleasure. I like
that. After our chat, I also asked Kaitlyn if she would like to perform a poem. And she did, and here it is.
This is one I wrote recently, and it's called When You See Him. Send him my worst. He's already had my best. Ate it up like a greedy child and left, so send him my pettiness, my rage, and my pain. Send him my hate, hand on the years, spent in recovery. Gift him the violent tendencies which are new, never used. If he has room next to your friendship, perhaps you might give him my flashbacks, my night's work and sweat. Send him my best wishes that it all end. Forward doctor's bills and invoices for workdays lost. Send him grief. Graft my ill wishes onto a non-committal shrug. Pretend you don't know what I mean. Cloak my hurt in the benefits of doubt, all his. Shroud my living nightmare. Press upon him a community's reserve. Send him a flickering lamp. Pretend I don't know what he meant, that I thread needles through men and stitch them to half-truths and wishes, that my reason, which is so careful in all else, so studied and thorough, and my expression, in which I am frugal with everything except love, and my opinion, valued by editors and not parted with until I have researched every term, are now worthless because you like this guy, and because I once loved him.
Believe it or not, after this conversation, Kaitlyn and I went out for burgers and talked for another 2 hours off the microphone. Her thoughts are very much worth hearing, and if you'd like to hear more, you can go to her website to read some of her writing at KaitlynPlyley.com. That's KaitlynPlyley. She's on Twitter at @KPlyley, and you can catch up with her podcast, Just a Spoonful, available where you can get most podcasts. You can also hear the first time I interviewed Kaitlyn back in 2014 on 4ZZZ. She came on to promote her one-person show, Not Much to Tell You. At the time, I think I thought it was a really great conversation, but in listening back to it, I think I really put my foot in it in a few places. But if you're interested in that historical artifact, I will post the link in the comments on Facebook, or just Google 4ZZZ Exit Stage Z Kaitlyn Plyley. Addenda and corrections for this episode. The 4ZZZ radio theme in 2013 was Survival of the Z, to be precise. I'm going to post some photos and video from the shoot on the Gimme Empathy Facebook page, featuring me as a zombie, plus Kaitlyn and former guest Sam Kelly fighting us monsters off. Even though the makeup was disgusting, the pictures did indeed come out pretty well. The Hunger Games. What was the deal with President Snow's bloody mouth? Okay, so I looked this up. At some point in his political career, President Snow poisoned all of his allies out of the fear that they would turn against him. So he had to drink the poison as well, so as not to arouse suspicion. And even though he drank an antidote shortly after, he was left with sores in his mouth that never healed. And he always wears a special genetically modified white rose to cover up the smell of blood on his breath. Lovely. The first Hunger Games movie was shot entirely in North Carolina. The subsequent 3 were shot in Georgia, Hawaii, New Jersey, California, Massachusetts, Germany, and France. The fake Ernest Hemingway quote, "Write drunk, edit sober," is most likely a bastardization of a passage from the 1964 novel Reuben Reuben by Peter de Vries. The main character is based on the poet Dylan Thomas, and he says at one point, "Sometimes I write drunk and revise sober, and sometimes I write sober and revise drunk." But you have to have both elements in creation, the Apollonian and the Dionysian, or spontaneity and restraint, emotion and discipline. So in context, it's really a pretty different message to write drunk, edit sober. And as for Hemingway himself, he wrote in A Movable Feast that, "My training was never to drink after dinner, nor before I wrote, nor while I was writing." So that quote is pretty much all lies as it relates to Hemingway. Most of the film Catching Fire was shot on 35mm film, while the scenes in the arena were shot with a big old IMAX camera. The aspect ratio changes from 2.35 to 1 to 1.78 to 1 as Katniss ascends the elevator in the movie. Basically, the screen looks like it gets taller. It's really cool. In the initial cinema screenings, you would only get this effect in an actual IMAX theater. In a normal cinema, there would have been no change, which may be why you don't remember that from the film. They also included this ratio change on the Blu-ray release of the movie, although it still doesn't expand quite as far as it did in the IMAX theaters because those IMAX screens are about 6 stories tall. Thanks for listening for another week, or just for this week if this is the first one you're listening to. Or just to this part if you skip to the outro for some bizarre reason. None of this must make sense to you. Go back. Go back to the start. What are you doing? As always, you can contact me at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to things, review things, do all that. I'm on Twitter, @ScottMercer2 is my handle. Until next week, stay hungry. Stay hungry.